PlayStation has built their name on their exclusives. And while most people know of games like God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Forbidden West, there are a lot of upcoming exclusives for both the PS4 and PS5 that you may not know about. In fact, I found 25 games releasing exclusively in one way or another on PlayStation consoles. These include first-party exclusives, third-party console exclusives that are also releasing on PC, and third-party timed exclusives that are releasing sometime later for Xbox or Switch. In any case, if you want to play these games when they launch on a console, you'll need a PlayStation 4 and in some cases a PlayStation 5. Now, I'm planning on making a similar video for Xbox if this video performs well, so don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if that's something you're interested in. But for now, I hope you'll join me as I look, in no particular order, at 25 games coming exclusively to PlayStation. In the sequel to 2017's Horizon Zero Dawn, Aloy will travel to the west coast of the former United States to resolve a new global threat. It's called the Red Blight, and it's not only infected the world's landscapes and wildlife, it's also caused the world's weather to spiral out of control. Along your journey, you'll visit a host of new locations including San Francisco, Yosemite National Park, and what appears to be Nevada's Mojave Desert. And then there's this shot, which features a sign showing 4 aces from a deck of cards, which has led some to speculate that Aloy might also visit Las Vegas. And going back to this shot, some have speculated that perhaps Aloy will be able to climb more freely like in Breath of the Wild or the recent Assassin's Creed games, but this has not been confirmed. What has definitely been confirmed is that Aloy will spend more time exploring underwater, which will be made easier thanks to this breathing device which presumably allows her to stay submerged for longer. It's also worth noting that San Francisco is now submerged, at least partially. Here we see the city's iconic ferry building and here the Palace of Fine Arts, both underwater. Lastly, Forbidden West will feature a bunch of new machines including this turtle-like shell snapper, the pterodactyl-like sunwings, and these impressive Trumotusks. And see how this Trumotusk is being controlled by a rival tribe to fight against you? We know based on a developer commentary they'll be able to override and harness other machines as well, so look out. Sony has said to expect Forbidden West in the second half of 2021. RETURNAL is the next game by Housemarque, one of the most talented studios in the entire industry. If you played Resogun, Super Stardust, or Nex Machina, then you know how fun their games can be. As for RETURNAL, it's a third-person roguelite shooter that has you working your way through a procedurally generated alien planet. On each run, you'll find various items and augments, including 10 different weapons, over 90 weapon power-ups, and numerous parasites that have both positive and negative effects on your character. You can also spend resources to activate optional checkpoints, so unlike many roguelites, you won't always have to start over when you die. But when you do start over, which will likely be often, you'll be able to take some permanent upgrades with you, so there is a sense of character progression. Basically, expect a third-person bullet hell shooter crossed with the try again and again gameplay of Hades or Dead Cells. If Housemarque can maintain their normal level of quality, RETURNAL could be just as addictive as those games when it launches exclusively for the PlayStation 5 on March 19th. With Gran Turismo 7, we're getting the first numbered entry to the Gran Turismo franchise in over 7 years. As such, fans can expect a more fully featured game than we got with Gran Turismo Sport. This includes a proper campaign mode, as well as the return of in-depth vehicle tuning and the ability to purchase used cars. And if this screenshot is any indicator, there are tons of other features as well. In that GT7 is releasing for the PS5 only, it should also be absolutely stunning, with support for 4K at 60 frames per second and ray-traced reflections. As for cars and tracks, we don't know exactly how many we'll see of either, but as for tracks, we do know that Trial Mountain is making a return. We also saw in this clip of the trailer that we'll get to race across at least 4 continents. In North America alone, we can see 8 different locations, and if the red dots seen in this screenshot represent locations in Europe, that would add another 13 tracks to the roster. Add one other that we can see in South America, and that's at least 22 locations, not counting whatever tracks might be in Asia. While initially slated for the first half of 2021, PlayStation actually backtracked on that announcement, and GT7 could now come at any time during the year. Releasing not long after I published this video is the Nioh Collection, which features both the remastered versions of Nioh 1 and 2, plus all the DLC from both games. For the uninitiated, Nioh is one of the best Souls-like series not made by From Software, so if you're looking for a tough challenge with precise and rewarding combat, this could be for you. It's worth mentioning that this collection, which features the remastered versions of both games, is exclusive to the PS5. Sony is releasing the complete editions of both games for the PS4, but those won't be remasters. Also worth noting is that you can buy each remastered complete edition separately on PS5 for $49.99 US, but if you buy the collection, you get both games with all their associated content for $69.99. PlayStation isn't known for highly produced, indie-developed Metroidvanias, but with F.I.S.T. forged in Shadow Torch, that's exactly what we're getting, and boy is it gorgeous. In fact, the steampunk aesthetic of Torch City, where the game takes place, reminds me a lot of Midgard from the Final Fantasy VII Remake. As with most Metroidvanias, the city will be broken up into different areas, each featuring its own secrets and combat challenges that'll reward you with upgrades and collectibles. And speaking of combat, you'll have 3 main weapons: your fist, a drill, and a whip. The fist is the most balanced, while the drill is slow and powerful, and the whip is fast while dealing less damage. We don't know much about the abilities or upgrades you'll unlock, though one does appear to be this electronic grapple. When it comes to Metroidvanias, F.I.S.T. looks like one of the more promising games in the genre, and it's set to release in the spring of 2021. Even though Deathloop is published by Bethesda, which Microsoft purchased outright, the game will still be a 1-year timed exclusive for PlayStation 5, releasing on May 21st. What sets Deathloop apart is its story premise and how it shapes the gameplay. In short, you're an assassin in a time loop. You have 24 hours to explore an island and hunt down 8 targets. If you die or if you fail before the clock strikes midnight, you have to start over. But in each attempt, you discover the intricacies of the island, including the schedules of NPCs and the vulnerabilities of your targets. The more you learn, the more efficient you become, and the more targets you can kill. The island itself is divided into 4 districts, and they're all connected, which makes Deathloop sound more like an open world than a level-based experience. When it comes to combat, you will have guns and melee abilities, but you'll also have supernatural abilities like teleportation and telekinesis. It also sounds like stealth will be an option. This all makes sense, of course, because Deathloop is developed by the same studio behind Dishonored. Oh, and did I mention there's a rival assassin wandering the island constantly trying to pick you off? Yeah, there's a lot going on in this game, but the idea of one big island to explore and one big assassination contract to fulfill, which combine to create what is basically one big puzzle to solve, sounds amazing. In a nutshell, Destruction All-Stars sounds like a cross between Twisted Metal and Overwatch with a dash of Rocket League. Basically, you choose one of 16 heroes to literally jump on foot into one of the game's elaborate arenas, find a car, then drive around as you try to destroy your opponents. But here's the catch. Anytime someone destroys your car, you're forced back on foot, and you then have to parkour your way around the map as you dodge attacks, search for a new ride, or steal someone else's. Making things more interesting, each hero has special abilities that they can perform while on foot. For example, one hero can turn invisible while another can become invulnerable to attacks. Each hero also has a special vehicle that, once unlocked, also has its own special ability. For example, this one has a giant blade that can split other cars in half. And while the game will have a range of multiplayer modes, it will also have a single-player campaign made up of 50 different events. Finally, while Destruction All-Stars is a full-priced game, it will be offered for free to PlayStation Plus subscribers when it releases in February. Stray seemed to excite a lot of people when it was first revealed at the PlayStation 5 debut event. A self-described third-person cat adventure game, Stray lets you take control of, well, a stray cat as you explore a cyberpunk-themed city filled with only droids and other creatures, many of which are out to do you harm. On top of exploration, we know gameplay will feature puzzle solving and, quote, fast-paced action sequences. Along the way, you'll befriend a flying droid named B12 who can help get through certain puzzles and certain areas. One detail about Stray is that it's being released for the PS5 and PC, but not the PS4. In a post on the PlayStation blog, the developers did say that they're exploring, quote, all that this exciting piece of hardware offers us as creators. So hopefully Stray will be quite the looker when it releases in October of 2021. If you like the idea of solving mind-bending puzzles set in surreal 3D environments, definitely keep an eye on MAQUETTE. It's tough to describe the game any better than its publisher, Annapurna Interactive, describes the game on their website, so I'm just going to read their description. Quote, MAQUETTE is a recursive puzzle game that takes you into a world where every building, plant, and object are simultaneously tiny and staggeringly huge. MAQUETTE makes it possible by twisting the world into itself recursively in an MC Escher-esque fashion. Head to the center of the world and you'll feel like a giant, towering over buildings and walls. But venture further out and start to feel small as things get larger and larger, to the point where cracks in the ground become chasms. In MAQUETTE, you'll explore the scales of everyday problems in a modern-day love story, where sometimes the smallest of issues can become insurmountable obstacles. So there you have it. Now, this game will draw inevitable comparisons to the recent and very good Superliminal, but it definitely sounds like MAQUETTE will put its own spin on the surreal first-person puzzle subgenre, especially with the addition of a love story. MAQUETTE is set to release for PlayStation and PC sometime in 2021. One of the few truly next-gen exclusives of 2021, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart draws on the speed of the PS5's SSD to create an experience you could only get on a next-generation console. See these purple rifts? Well, they're actually portals to other levels, and when you jump through, you'll transition to an entirely new world seamlessly with no load times. It's going to be really interesting to explore a game built out of separate levels that are interconnected by an uninterrupted gameplay experience. But the game's new mechanics don't end there. You'll also be able to teleport within levels by firing a new tool called the Rift Tether at these yellow rifts. This can help you reach new areas and give you an edge in combat. And being a Ratchet & Clank game, you know it'll feature new weapons. For instance, there's the Topiary Sprinkler, which looks like some sort of ice-blasting turret. And we know Rift Apart will take full advantage of the DualSense controller. For example, if you're using the double-barreled shotgun, the adaptive triggers will provide extra resistance if you want to fire both barrels at once. And finally, Rift Apart introduces a brand new playable character in this female Lombax. We don't know anything about her, but it'll be fun to see if she introduces any new gameplay mechanics. Goodbye Volcano High is a cinematic, story-driven game that follows a group of two high school best friends and their two rivals. We don't know much about gameplay, but as for story, the game follows those four characters through their senior year, and you'll be required to make some pretty major decisions. Do you tell your crush how you feel, or keep it to yourself? Do you make more friends, or become more of a loner? It also looks like music will play a significant role in the game, as the main characters, Fang and their best friend Trish, are members of a band. And if you visit the game's website, there's a fun soundboard that lets you play one of the band's songs, and it's actually really good. If you have any nostalgia for high school and you like emotional, narrative experiences lifted up by a great soundtrack, this could be a game for you. Goodbye Volcano High is set to release for PS4, PS5, and PC sometime in 2021. Of all the indie games on this list, Kena Bridge of Spirits has received by far the most attention. It's a third-person action-adventure that focuses on exploration and combat, but the most unique aspect of the game are these cute little creatures called the Rot. They're companions that you find and recruit along your journey, and apparently there are 100 of them hidden throughout the world. As you find and recruit them, they'll imbue your character with new combat abilities, and they'll help you manipulate the environment in new ways. This could include mending a broken bridge so you can cross, or moving a block to help you reach a new area. And when you get into a fight, you'll have a staff that can apparently double as your bow, and you'll have some sort of magical defensive force field. One potential downside is that the game will be relatively short. A developer recently said the game could be finished within a weekend. Finally, Kena is not an open-world game. Rather, it features a hub that allows you to explore several separate regions, which we'll all get to experience when the game releases for PS4, PS5, and PC in March of 2021. As intriguing as the trailer is for Little Devil Inside, it doesn't really explain what type of game to expect. PlayStation describes it as a, quote, action-adventure RPG with survival elements set in an atmospheric, semi-open world. And the game's official site says that you'll, quote, embark on hostile missions and journeys that challenge your survival instincts and the choices you make. Other than that, we do know a few things. First off, you'll take the role of a hunter who we see here, and you'll work for this older character. He's apparently a professor, and he's building some sort of compendium of creatures and monsters which you'll find and hunt down as you roam the world. The game's developers have described the game as a survival experience, and early gameplay footage shows that you'll definitely be hunting, scavenging, and making do with limited resources. Also, the Kickstarter page for Little Devil Inside does mention co-op multiplayer missions. So will this be an indie, cartoonish version of Monster Hunter? One thing the trailer definitely makes clear is you will go up against some truly massive creatures. The details around Little Devil Inside's exclusivity are a little fuzzy, but it appears to be set for a PS4, PS5, and PC release this July, with a possible Xbox and Switch release sometime later. Revealed at the 2020 Game Awards, Season caught many people by surprise thanks to its simple yet crisp and stunning visuals. But the overall premise sounds equally striking. You play a woman on a bicycle road trip, and using a video camera, tape recorder, and sketchbook, you'll record the existence of various communities, all before a devastating cataclysm changes the world forever. Now, one interesting aspect of the story and the gameplay is that it's not your mission to stop the oncoming disaster, just bear witness to everything right before it happens. As put by the PlayStation blog, quote, the mission is similar to making a time capsule, deciding what would capture the spirit of the time period and carry it onwards. Also, according to Kevin Sullivan, creative director on Season, your mission will not be entirely linear. Quote, if you play through it once, you'll get what you're supposed to get, but there are definitely choices you'll make where you want to know what would happen otherwise. No release date or release window has been set for Season, but it's slated to be a PS5 console exclusive with a simultaneous release on PC. We don't know much about God of War Ragnarok. Heck, we don't even know if that's what it's going to be called, but we do know that Sony hopes to release it in 2021. Based on the word Ragnarok, the game will very likely take place in the same Norse-themed world as the 2018 masterpiece, with a focus on the attached mythology. And while this probably goes without saying, we can assume based on the voice in the trailer that Kratos will be in the game. But what about Atreus? Will he be much older? Will he be playable? We'll have to wait and see. And if you didn't know, the word Ragnarok refers to a mythological global cataclysm in Norse mythology where the world nearly ends and many of the great Norse gods like Thor and Odin all die. So basically expect a big epic quest through more of the frigid north and expect to kill a god or 2 or 5. If Ragnarok does release in 2021, which is a big if, I'd expect it sometime in the fall. GHOSTWIRE Tokyo is a spooky, first-person action-adventure set in an alternate version of Japan's most famous metropolis, where 99% of the population have vanished, only to be replaced by spectral creatures known as the Visitors. Exploration will be a part of the game, as it sounds like you'll be climbing skyscrapers and discovering older, more traditional locations as well. But from the looks of it, supernatural combat will be the main focus. Shinjiro Hara, combat director on GHOSTWIRE Tokyo, said in an official Bethesda blog post, quote, "We want the player to feel like a badass, spellcasting, high-tech ninja exorcist defeating countless evil spirits." End quote. We also know the combat system will be combo-based, and that it will draw parallels, surprisingly enough, to the recent Doom games. That's because Hara actually worked on Doom 2016. More specifically, he worked on Doom's Glory Kill system, and he described in that same post how he's developing a similar system for GHOSTWIRE. Quote, "In GHOSTWIRE, you can take down enemies from both close proximity as well as from a distance. When the visitors are vulnerable and their core is exposed, you can pull out the core with spiritual wires. You can also use these wires to chain kill multiple enemies." End quote. No specific release date has been set, but we do know that GHOSTWIRE Tokyo should release sometime in 2021 as a one-year timed exclusive. Project ATHIA is an open-world game being developed for the PS5 by Luminous Productions. If you're unfamiliar with Luminous, they're a dedicated AAA team composed of devs who previously worked on Final Fantasy XV. That said, we don't know if Project ATHIA will be an RPG or more of an action-adventure. Based on the trailer, you'll play as an agile female protagonist, and it's safe to say that the gameplay will feature platforming as well as combat that lets you cast various types of magic. Also, it looks like the world will be pretty vast, to say the least. One interesting detail about the trailer is that it proclaims the protagonist will find herself, quote, "in a world not her own." Then we see this shot which shows her wearing sneakers that look very, well, Earth-like. So perhaps she's from Earth and has been transported to this fantasy world where she's been imbued with magical powers. Finally, it was recently revealed that Project ATHIA will release in January of 2022 for PS5 and PC as a 2-year, yes, 2-year, timed exclusive. So the game will eventually come to Xbox Series X. That said, don't expect to see it on PS4 or Xbox One. Arguably the biggest third-party console exclusive for PlayStation is Final Fantasy XVI. All we have for actual gameplay details are what we've seen in the trailer, which shows some pretty spectacular combat sequences. Notable is that they all feature solo combat rather than the more traditional party-based combat Final Fantasy is known for. That said, this doesn't mean much since Square Enix hasn't officially commented on gameplay. Thankfully, the game's official website has revealed at least some story details. You'll explore a world called Valisthea, which is facing an existential crisis called the Blight. Within this world are special individuals called Dominants who can summon the world's most powerful entities known as Icons. On both the game's official site and in the trailer, we've heard of icons named Ifrit and Shiva, so these could be this world's equivalent of summons. Finally, we know the story of Final Fantasy XVI will revolve around a character named Clive, who serves as the bodyguard for his younger brother Joshua, who happens to be a dominant. Apparently, something very bad happens to Clive early on, causing him to seek revenge. Now, who he might have it out for remains a mystery, but we'll apparently get more information sometime in 2021. As for when we'll get to play Final Fantasy XVI, I've seen some people expecting a 2021 release, but producer Naoki Yoshida said in a post on the PlayStation blog that the game is still quite a ways off. In Jett: The Far Shore, you play an explorer named May who's been tasked with scouting an alien ocean planet in hopes of finding a new home for humanity. Along your journey, you'll discover a mysterious signal called the Himwave, which is described on PlayStation.com as an interstellar invitation. Gameplay details remain vague, but we know Jett will feature an open world and that the narrative follows a linear structure. Based again on the game's official page on PlayStation.com, you'll quote, endure hardships, evade pursuers, and grapple with massive Kolos creatures by navigating hazards and outpacing or outsmarting adversaries. That makes it sound like you'll face monsters, but that you might have to evade them rather than face them head-on. The blog also describes some sort of research and what sounds like navigation or traversal puzzles. Quote, inspect indigenous flora and fauna, adapt to new perils, and problem-solve through obstacles using your Jett's array of scientific tools. Lastly, the blog describes an endgame that features open-world sim elements. Again, this is all pretty vague, but the game is being developed by the same team behind another game called Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery, which was fantastic. Hopefully we'll learn more about Jett: The Far Shore before it releases sometime in 2021. From the developers of Hyper Light Drifter, one of the best-reviewed indie games of the previous generation, Solar Ash is a third-person action-adventure that plunges you into the Ultra Void, which looks an awful lot like a black hole, and which the developer describes as a, quote, place of incredible danger and surreal spaces. Sure enough, the environments you'll visit are indeed surreal, and the game places an emphasis on speedy traversal, as it appears you can almost surf your way through the world. As described on the PlayStation blog, quote, players will blast through high-speed traversal challenges with wild gravity and beautiful vistas while slaying massive monsters and meeting other lost souls. Based on how the trailer ends, it does seem as if the game will feature some sort of gravity-defying mechanic, and it's also made pretty clear based on the last second or so that yes, you will encounter at least one massive creature. If a surreal, traversal-focused action-adventure from an incredibly talented studio catches your interest, you should be able to play Solar Ash on PS4, PS5, and PC this June. If you never played any of the 2D ODDWORLD games, these are complex puzzle platformers where you play a creature called a mudkin. Your primary goal is to escape the oppressive corporate regime that has enslaved you, and your secondary goal is to save as many of your kind as possible. To do this, you have to solve some truly challenging head-scratchers and execute some pretty tough platforming. Now, this is a direct follow-up to the recent New and Tasty, but quite a few gameplay mechanics have been added. First off, the mudkins you're trying to save now have much more agency. They can help you take out enemies and access new areas. Second, the game introduces an economy. You'll collect currency which you can use at vending machines to purchase items. But perhaps most exciting is the game's new crafting and inventory system. There are plenty of items in the world that are useful on their own, such as, say, a fire extinguisher, but find a lighter, some wires, a battery, and some flammable brew, and you can craft a flamethrower. This will not only mean more variety in terms of puzzles, but also the way you can take out enemies. Finally, each level tracks how many mudkins you rescue, how many secrets you find, and how long you take, making this game perfect for both completionists and speedrunners. SOULSTORM is set to release for PS4, PS5, and PC in the spring of 2021. Tribes of Midgard is a Viking-themed co-op survival action RPG where you have to build up your fortress and level up your character to survive and take on godlike giants. The basic premise is this. At the center of your village, you're protecting the seed of Yggdrasil, a tree that holds the key to everlasting life. As such, you've got to build up your defenses to fend off attacks of creatures that either want to destroy the seed or take it for themselves. This means you've got to venture into the wild to slay monsters as you harvest resources to level up your Viking and your fortress. If your fortress falls, well, just try again in a new procedurally generated world. With 4 character classes to choose from and a new world every time, there should be a good amount of variety on each attempt. The game also features up to 10-player co-op, a day-night cycle in which things get far more dangerous after dark, and an art style that's absolutely gorgeous. But the star of the show is likely to be the giants. These are huge mythical bosses, and you'll need to level up and spec out your character before you have any hope to slay a giant, especially if you go solo. Tribes of Midgard is set to release for PS4, PS5, and PC sometime in 2021. I'm only showing screenshots of Babylon's Fall because the last time I showed trailer footage I was issued a copyright claim, but in any case, this is the first collaboration between Square Enix and Platinum Games since Nier Automata, but unlike Nier, Babylon's Fall is more fantasy than futuristic. We learned from the reveal trailer that you'll do battle as a class of warriors called the Nomads, who can harness the power of an energy source called the Oversoul. And you'll be fighting the gods. Then in the more recent gameplay trailer, we got to see that, yep, this game features Platinum's trademark action through and through. It looks like you'll fight with both an actual sword, as well as these spectral swords that can swirl around you. You'll also be able to execute combos, including aerial combos, and you'll have a cool grapple maneuver. We also got to see that some environments will apparently transform, which could make for some cool exploration. Unfortunately, Platinum Games has fallen silent regarding Babylon's Fall, so we don't even have a release window. That said, the game was announced as a PlayStation console exclusive that's also being developed for PC. It's hard to do anything new and innovative in the first-person shooter genre, but Boundary is sure as heck gonna try. This is a zero-gravity, outer space, multiplayer-only FPS. You'll be able to choose from multiple operators, and each one can be customized to fit within certain roles. For example, one operator named Lucas can act as either an assaulter or a sniper, each coming with their own special tools and abilities. For example, an assaulter will have a special adrenaline shot that can heighten their senses, and a sniper will have a mechanical arm that can be used to stabilize their shots. As for the controls, players will have a full 360-degree range of movement thanks to on-suit thrusters, and you'll have a grappling hook that can be used further to overcome the challenges of zero gravity. We don't know how many maps will be available, but expect space stations, satellites, and other structures to fly around and use to your advantage. Boundary was initially scheduled for a 2020 release on PlayStation 4 and PC, but with no new date announced, let's just hope it releases in 2021. Believe it or not, Boundary isn't the only zero-gravity exclusive set to release on PlayStation. In Heavenly Bodies, you're a cosmonaut tasked with maintaining a space station. That means you'll have to perform repairs and build parts, and to do so, you'll have independent control over each of your 4 limbs. Holding R2 and L2, then moving the left and right joysticks will move your left and right arms. Similarly, holding R1 and L1 will allow you to move your legs. Based on that control scheme, I'm hopeful that Heavenly Bodies puts the adaptive triggers on the DualSense controller to good use. Think about it. Without gravity, you'll constantly be looking for leverage. Moving around will require you to push off walls, and to pull a simple lever, you'll have to grab a hold of a stationary part of your environment. Everything from ropes to robotic arms to random objects floating in space will mimic zero-gravity physics. And most terrifying is that the game takes into account the vacuum of outer space. So yeah, don't open that hatch. Finally, the game will feature co-op, which could result in some really fun and even comical multiplayer scenarios. From what I can tell, Heavenly Bodies is currently set for an August 2021 release for PS4, PS5, and PC. So there you have it. Those are 25 of the most interesting exclusives coming to both the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 in the near, and in some cases, not too near future. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends. And if you want more Quest Mode content, I hope you'll consider subscribing. Lastly, if you want to keep up with me and see what I'm playing, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Quest Mode Games. Until next time, I want to remind everyone to never stop questing.